And so we're starting this evening with a memoriam, with a commemoration, and with a remembrance of the very, very important work of Robert W. McChesney. And so to do that and get things kicked off this evening, we have one of our Izzy Award judges with us who was a student of McChesney's for years and a dear friend. Victor Pickard is professor of communication at the University of Pennsylvania, co-director of Media Inequality and Change Center. His most recent book, Democracy Without Journalism, is a must-read if you want to understand the challenges we face and what we can do about it, and the importance of public media and how we need to rebuild it and actually build it in a way that is truly public and truly in the public interest. Victor's work is, again, absolutely essential for anyone that wants to do this kind of work. As I mentioned, he's one of our Izzy judges, and I want to welcome Victor right now to say a few words about the late, great Bob McChesney. Victor?
Thanks so much for that introduction, Mickey. And it's so great, it's such an honor to be here with so many great journalists and so many people who care about great journalism. And I've been asked to say just a few remarks about our dear friend, the renowned media scholar and activist Bob McChesney, who passed away last month. Bob was my academic advisor, but he was so much more than that. He was my mentor, my comrade. In many ways, he was my personal life coach. So I'm going to miss him terribly, and I could stand up here and sing his praises all night, but I will keep it brief. Bob was certainly not a fan of flowery language, and he probably would feel a little embarrassed if we spent too much time talking about him. He'd prefer the spotlight to be focused on the journalists. But it is very fitting to honor him at the Izzy's. It was an institution that he cared so deeply about. Bob was an Izzy judge for many years, but more than that, he was an unflinching champion for the kind of journalism that I.F. Stone represents. Journalism for social justice, journalism that can change the world. Bob once said in an interview that, quote, "I want 1,000 I.F. Stones combing Washington and Wall Street, investigating power." And that's what Bob dedicated his life to, not just cheering on the next generation of I.F. Stones, but working tirelessly toward reforming our entire media system at a deep structural level to help ensure that the kind of journalism being honored here tonight isn't the exception, it's the norm. Bob spent his life's work focused on this project, from co-founding Free Press, the largest media reform organization in the country, to authoring dozens of books on the political economy of news media. He fought for a system that treated journalism as the public good that it is, as a service to democracy and justice, not simply a commodity bought and sold on the market, enriching a handful of media owners. He advocated for a system that would make sure journalists were paid well to do good work that we all so desperately need, to confront power, to expose social problems, to go where the silences are, to let journalists be journalists. We're not there yet, obviously. In fact, we're a far cry from anything close to Bob's vision. Local commercialism continues to collapse. Corporate media continues to cave to power. Bob never stopped ringing the alarm bells about these problems, but he also never gave up hope that another media system is possible. And he urged us all to fight to change the media policies themselves, to help create a new system from the ground up, to democratize our entire system. He called on us to support independent media in any way that we can. And above all else, he reminded us that it's our media, not theirs, not the corporations, not just the wealthy, but belongs to us all. So it's in that spirit that I ask us all to remember Bob McChesney, and to honor his legacy by carrying on the struggle for the journalism that we all need, for the kind of journalism being honored here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. Our next speaker is going to come up and say a few words about Bob McChesney as well, and I've already called him out once, and I'll call him again. Jeff Cohen was the founding director of the Park Center for Independent Media and endowed chair and associate professor here from 2008 to 2018. In 1986, he founded FAIR, the National Media Watch Group, and he helped launch its magazine Extra and its syndicated radio show Counterspin. And I remember being in high school, and I remember seeing Extra magazine on the stand, and it spoke to me largely. And of course, it helped me find Project Censored later on. Jeff was also senior producer in corporate media at MSNBC for Phil Donahue's show until it was terminated on the eve of the Iraq War. And of course, Jeff wrote an amazing book about his experiences, Cable News Confidential, My Misadventures in Corporate Media. With that, I would like to welcome to the stage Jeff Cohen to talk a little more about Bob McChesney and also bestow our first Izzy Award this year. Jeff Cohen.
It's great to be back in Ithaca. I came to the college in 2008, largely because Bob McChesney connected me up with Adelaide and the Park Center for Independent Media, which was just an idea. It was not reality. Bob was a great friend. He was an Izzy Award judge almost every year since we launched the award. He spent his whole life not only fighting for a more diverse democratic media system, but for a fairer, more decent society. Every one of Bob McChesney's books enlightened us about media consolidation, about the negative and sensorial impacts of an information system increasingly dominated by giant amoral corporations. I thought of Bob when we saw the billionaires who control the internet beaming from the front row of Trump's inauguration. And I thought of Bob in recent months as media corporations have been lavishing Trump with what amounts to multi-million-dollar bribes to settle harassment lawsuits that Trump could not possibly win in a court of law. That includes Disney, which owns ABC News and so much more. It includes Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook and so much more. And it will soon include, as Mickey mentioned, Paramount, which owns Comedy Central and CBS News. When Paramount settles the Trump harassment lawsuit by paying Trump a few $1 million and perhaps getting a few more CBS News journalists to leave CBS, it will pave the way for Trump's administration to give final approval of the Paramount merger, and on the day of that merger, the boss of Paramount will be nearly $2 billion richer than she is today. In a democracy, media have to be counted on to expose government and corporate corruption. Our mainstream media system is part of that corruption, which is why independent, non-corporate news outlets and independent journalists like the ones who have won the award today, why they are so much more important than ever. We launched the Izzy Award to honor such journalists, and we named it after I.F. Stone, who spent the 1950s exposing the McCarthyite witch hunts, the 1960s exposing all the deception of the Vietnam War at a time that corporate mainstream media were failing the public. One final note about Bob McChesney before I introduce the first Izzy Award winner of the night. If you read the New York Times obituary that came out this month of Bob, you'll find a fairly thorough and accurate review of his books, his scholarship, his ideas. But you'll also notice a bizarre one-sentence paragraph referencing a far-out right-winger. It reads, quote, "The conservative writer David Horowitz put Professor McChesney on a list of the 101 most dangerous academics in America including him among tenured radicals who were indoctrinating U.S. students, unquote. I think Bob would have had mixed feelings seeing that paragraph in his New York Times obituary. I know that he relished being called dangerous by this notorious individual, number one. And number two, seeing this guy incongruously included in the middle of his New York Times obituary would have offered further confirmation of Bob's life work, exposing the ideological biases, often petty biases of mainstream media. And by the way, I read a lot of the New York Times coverage of the death of Pope Francis. I'm yet to find any the need to have balancing quotations from members of the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple, and I've looked very hard.